as a mighty man of thoughts. Gideon is a warrior. Yes, Gideon is a warrior. And who appeared to Gideon? Angel of the Lord. Yes, most likely the second member of the Godhead, Jesus Christ, did he not? And notice that first point on your notes there, folks. God is willing to do all that is necessary to convince good men and good women to be in His service. Okay, folks, God wants individuals who are strong, who are qualified to do His will and to serve Him. And He needs Gideon now, does He not? So He's going to do all He can to get Gideon into His service. First thing He does, send an angel to him, doesn't He? That's the very first thing He does. And the angel tells him, I need you to deliver the children of Israel from the Midianites. Gideon then makes a request of the angel. And what does he request? Yes, I need a sign, don't you? I need some evidence that this is all true. And the angel says, well, you're not going to get one. Is that what he says? No. The angel gives him a sign, does he not? And he burns up the goat and that Gideon had brought to him and confirmed his words. After that was over, Gideon was worried, was he not? And what was he worried about? Yes, he says, man, I've seen the Lord. And if I've seen the Lord, that means I'm going to what? Die. And he cries out to God, does he not? Have mercy upon me, O God. And what does God do? Yes, He comforts him, does He not? He tells him to have peace, to not be afraid. You will not what? You will not die. So Gideon, folks, is locked into the service of God now, is he not? Notice that second statement. Once a person has been enlisted by God, the work begins. Got it? Folks, God doesn't call you to do nothing. Okay? That's not the kind of God that we serve. God calls you to do something. The work begins. Many times the tasks that God gives His servants are not easy. They require courage, they require stamina, they require endurance, and they take great faith on the part of the individual who is a leader. The first task that Gideon was given would create quite a stir among the inhabitants of his household and the inhabitants of the city itself. Notice the title of our lesson, The Pulling Down of the Altar of who? Of Baal. Wow. The pulling down of the altar of Baal. Just think about that. God calls you into His service. He wants you to deliver Israel from the hand of the Midianites. But the first thing you have to do is what? Destroy the altar of Baal. Wow. Unbelievable. Point number one, the responsibility laid upon Gideon. The shattering of Baal's altar. Judges 6:25. And it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, Take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the grove that is by it. Notice first the immediacy of the action. The word says what? And it came to pass what? The same night. He didn't get no rest. He gets called, and the same night. It'd be like you go to hire on at a job, walk to McDonald's, say, I need a job. And they say, can you start now? I didn't mean to start now. I thought maybe next week. Oh no, You're going to start when? It's time to start right now. Folks, there are things that God often needs done immediately, doesn't He? And there is no sense in waiting. Notice the lesson. Following God should be done immediately, should it not? Folks, there is no need to put it off for other things. Matthew 8, somebody turn there, 21 and 22, and read that reading. Sometimes individuals like to put off obedience to the gospel and put off following Jesus, and you don't need to do that. Who's got it? Matthew 8. Wow. Notice first, the Lord's calling individuals to follow Him. Okay? And He's asking them, come follow me. And this guy comes up and he says, what? Suffer me first to go bury what? The dead. And not just any dead, what? Bury my dead father. Let me tell you something, folks. I'll guarantee you, in this audience, a dead father will take precedence over just about anything. Want it? Want it? I'm telling you, if you don't believe it, let your daddy die. You'll stop everything, won't you? And guess what the Lord said? Let the dead bury the dead. It's time to what? Follow me. Folks, we don't let anything stand in front of our service to the Almighty, do we? At least we should not. And pretty important. Notice the imperatives given. Number 1, take thy father's young bullock, even the second bullock of 7 years old. Now that statement causes quite a stir among commentaries. Because the question is this: how many bullocks is Gideon being asked to bring? 1 or 2? Some say 1, some say who? 2. Okay? And that's another one of those, write it in your question book. Okay? We'll never know the answer for certain as to that question. Most Jewish commentators, okay, who commentate on this, and the Talmud itself believes that there were 2 bullocks. Okay? And notice how you could read it like this. Take thy father's young bullock. That's 1. Even the second bullock of 7 years old. Okay, so take that one, and even what? And even the other one. Okay, some individuals believe that you would need 2 bullocks in order to assist in the carrying of the necessary supplies for the altar, and also even in the tearing down of the altar of who? Baal, folks. These things weren't just, lightly constructed. Okay, the things that they built for these gods were pretty well constructed. And so, having the help of a couple of bulls, oxen, whatever, it could be pretty beneficial to you when you throw down that altar. Notice what he says. Throw down who? The altar of Baal. Who is Baal? He is the supreme god of the Phoenicians. Okay? He is known as the god of fertility. The god of fertility. Do they like to worship a lot of fertility gods? Oh yes, that made the worship exciting. If you know what I mean. If you don't, talk to me later. Now notice, I give you a picture there on the left. There's the god known as Baal. Okay? And the one on the right is what are referred to as the groves. We'll talk about those in just a second. Notice that the altar is said to belong to whom? Not to the Midianites. To his father's house. And throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath. Folks, this altar was in Gideon's father's field. Wow. You see, the children of Israel had gone off, had they not, into idolatrous practices. And it appears as though Gideon's household, at least his father, was involved in part of that, does it not? Now, some may ask, is it his father's? And how was it his father's? It may have been that it was his father's in the sense that it was built on what? His land. He allowed it, didn't he? And it may have been in the sense that he is the one who provided all the materials for it to be erected. But we're going to find out in a few minutes that it's not just for his Father's house. It is a community worship place. Okay? The altar was built and many individuals could come and worship at this particular altar. Notice that he tells him not only throw down the altar, but cut down the what? The grove that is by it. Okay, the grove. Almost every god had his cohort or his mate. Okay? And so you had the male god, who was who? Baal. Well, you'd also have a female god that went along with him. Okay? And that female god was known as Ashtarti, Ashtoreth, or Ashereth. All of those names can mean the exact same goddess. Okay? And sometimes one nation worshiped the same God as another nation, and yet they just called them by what? Different names. Okay? Just different names. But they were the same God or goddess. And so here you'd have the main altar, and that altar would be made out to whom? To Baal. This is Baal's altar, so he's the predominant god. And then around that, they would erect small little sculptures of guess who? The female goddess. Sometime there would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 erected all around there. And it was called the what? The grove. Look at the statue that you see on your right up there in the picture. Okay? It looks like a tree's just been carved out, has it not? Folks, that is the goddess Ashtaroth or Ashtoreth, however you want to pronounce it. They may have had, like I said, 6 or 8 of them, and they refer to that as the grove. And he says, I want you to tear down what? The altar? And I want you to tear down every one of those female goddesses who've been built around it. Every one of those are to be torn down. Judges 2:13 says this, and they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Judges 3:7 says, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and forgot the Lord their God and served Balaam and the groves. So these groves are the female counterpart of Balaam. It's almost like they're married to one another. That's kind of what they, in their minds, kind of portray. Unbelievable. Notice a couple of lessons that we have there. Folks, before a person can worship and serve the true God, guess what you've got to do? You've got to get rid of the false ones. Right? Yeah, Brett says you cannot serve two masters, and that's exactly right. And so, here God is. He says, yes, I'm going to redeem you. Yes, I'm going to send Gideon to deliver you. But you first have to do what? You've got to get rid of the Baal worship of the false gods. Notice the question that I put there. Are there any altars you need to remove from your life so you can better serve God? Man, that's just a personal question, okay? We may have some altars that we've erected that we bow the knee to that are hindering what? Hindering our worship to the Almighty. Folks, you need to get rid of the altars, don't you? You need to get rid of those false gods in our lives before that can happen. Notice this next point. Folks, if it were not for the imaginations of man, false gods would not exist. Man contrives them and makes images of them that are made up in his own feeble little mind. Somebody turn to Romans and read Romans 1:22 and 23. Notice that. First, they profess themselves to be what? Wise. But they're really what? Fools. And then they attempt to change the nature of God, don't they? Here's an incorruptible God, right? And what do? They change Him into an image made like unto corruptible things. Such as what? Well, He gives us a list there, doesn't He? Man, birds, four-footed beasts, creeping things. Folks, look at every god that is ever erected, and guess what it looks like? A man, a fish, an animal of some sort. Okay? Dagon. We studied the temple of Dagon in previous lessons, and Dagon was erected. It looked like a what? Anybody know? A fish with the head of a man. Okay, the fish with the head of a man. What's this all about? Right? And so, there's never a time. You can't imagine something that doesn't what? That doesn't exist. It's an impossibility. Okay? And so here they go. They don't want to imagine God, do they? So they want to imagine a false God, but you can't imagine something that doesn't exist. So what do they come up with? Just things that are already created. Okay? Yep. In their feeble mind. That's exactly right. Notice the setting up of the altar of the Lord. And build an altar unto the Lord thy God upon the top of this rock, in the ordered place. And take the second bullock and offer a burnt sacrifice with wood of the grove which thou shalt cut down. Wow. Here's something that I was noticing. There was an altar for Baal, but there was no altar for who? For God. Joash didn't have an altar for God on his property. There was an altar for Baal, but none for God. That one had to be torn down and one built for God on the property, didn't it? Here's the lesson, folks. When man seeks other gods, he soon forgets what? The worship of the Almighty. Okay? Folks, you can't what? You can't serve two masters. If you're going to serve Baal, guess what? You serve Baal. If you're going to serve Jehovah, you serve who? Jehovah. And if you're going to serve one, you're going to do what? Forget the other, aren't you? Just found that was interesting. The altar of Baal had been built on a prominent rock, meaning a prominent place, on the top of a what? On the top of a rock. When it was removed, watch this, God wanted His altar put where? On the rock where Baal's altar had been. Wow. The words in the ordered place mean in an orderly arrangement, in an orderly fashion is what he means. And notice that the wood to be used for the sacrifice was what? The wood from the grove. Remember I told you, they just cut out trees, formed and fashioned them into their goddesses, and then set them in the ground all around the altar. Well, God said, you tear all those down and you use that wood for what? For fire for the sacrifice. Unbelievable. The bullock of 7 years old was to be offered unto God. How long had Israel been in captivity? 7 years under Midian. Some believe that it was representative of those 7 years of oppression. Let's just think about this. All these men of the city go to bed that night, and there's the altar of Baal, and there's the grove, right? Well, that night, Gideon's been commanded to do what? You tear all that mess down, you put up a new altar, the altar of who? Jehovah, make a sacrifice there, and use what wood? Use the wood of the groves in order to make that sacrifice. Folks, that's what you call total victory. as far as God is concerned. He replaces the altar and uses the wood of the Ashtaroth for his own sacrifice. That's total victory for the Almighty God. Man. Point number 2, the realization of the command. It begins with the service rendered by Gideon. Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord said unto him. Man. Gideon was prompt in his obedience, wasn't he? Folks, God told him what to do, and guess what he did? He did it. Well, let me think on that, God. Well, God, let me take a couple of weeks and come up with a good plan on how to do that. You know, that's kind of the way we are, aren't we? You know, we got to sit and think about things, stew over them for a while. Folks, not Gideon. Now, what's really interesting to me is this. This verse makes me want to know more about Gideon. The Bible says what? Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants. Now, folks, if you've got 10 servants, that tells me a little something about you. Doesn't it you? He must have been prominent, mustn't he? He must have been at some time a fairly wealthy individual, or at least who was? At least his dad was, wasn't he? Because he was still there in the household of his father and living among his father. So they must have been a fairly predominant family in that community. Okay? And they were the ones responsible for housing what? The altar of Baal. Man. Unbelievable. Notice that third point there. When he was doing the Lord's bidding, I wonder what was going through his mind. You know what? God told him to take down the altar. Guess what? He goes, grabs 10 servants, and guess what he does? He goes, takes down that altar. Doesn't he? Folks, he's a human being, just like we are. Right? Can you imagine what was going through his mind when he was doing that? It's demolition day, boys! I wonder who threw the first whack at that altar, don't you? And as that wood's being removed, and you just see those groves being cast down and hitting the ground. What's going through their mind, folks? You know that there's some emotions that they're experiencing. You know there's something that's going through them. They're just regular, normal human beings like we are. Yes, they're doing the bidding of God. See, sometimes we just read these texts and all we do is think about what? Okay, God said do it, He did it, blah, blah, blah. No, there's a lot going on in that text that we're not told about. Notice that second point, the stealth of night. And it was so because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, that he could not do it by day, but he did it by night. Wow. Sometimes the things God's people are called upon to do are not what? Folks, they're not that popular, okay? And Gideon feared two groups of people, didn't he? The Bible says he feared, number one, who? His household. He already had a big... Well, let me ask you this. How many sons did Gideon have? Anybody remember? From our introduction? No. Nobody remembers? 70 sons. Okay? 70 sons. Okay? He had 10 RVs, or SUVs, whatever they're called, to carry them kids. Okay, can you imagine that? You know? Toyota loved when he came in. Yeah, I need 10 minivans, please. You know? 70 sons just in his house. Just in his house. And the Bible says many wives, doesn't it? Folks, that's a big community, isn't it? Just of him. So he feared his father's house. And who else? The men of the city. You see, That's what we were talking about a while ago. This wasn't just an altar for who? For his family. His family was prominent, had built this altar, and it was an altar for who? Everyone that lived in the town of Ophra could come and worship there. But notice point 2. Even though he was fearful, his fear didn't what? His fear didn't paralyze him. Okay? God said what? Tear down the altar. Did he do it? Yes. He just did it how? By night rather than by day. Now here's something we do need to realize. The Lord had not told him precisely when to do it, did he? Now if the Lord had told him, you make certain that you do this at noon, and then he did it by night, it'd been a whole different ball game, wouldn't it? The Lord didn't tell him when to do it. He just said to do it. And so he was still obeying God, and he was also doing what? Overcoming his fear, wasn't he? Even though he was fearful, he still did what was right. Notice point 3 there. I just got to thinking about this. Were there some problems doing it at night? Guys, they didn't have street lights. Okay?
If he would have done it during the day, he would have been interrupted probably by a mob.
Probably so. But at night you got problems too, right? You go out there, there's no light. So what you have to take? Got to take a lot of torches, right? So it tells me, what somebody's driving by, oh, look over there. Look at what all the torches for over at Baal's altar. What are they doing? I didn't know they had worship over there tonight. Okay? And let me ask you something. Do things sound louder at night than they do in the day? Yeah. Folks, you get out somewhere and you start tearing down an altar and throwing wood around and building stuff. Man, can you imagine the noise that was created that night? And he brought what? 10 of his servants. That meant 10 of his men were not in their normal place that night. Where's John tonight? I don't know, he went off with Gideon somewhere. Well, where's Jim? Well, he went off with Gideon and John. And then all of a sudden, it's 10 of them. Where'd 10 of them go? What are they doing? It could get tough. The lesson, though, when God has not specifically told us how to do something, then guess what? We are free to carry out the command in the way that we see the best way to do it, right? God has told us to go into all the world. Well, folks, I don't know about you, the best way to go is not on horseback today. Okay, I think I'll get in my car if I'm going to go. Aren't you? So the Lord has told us to assemble. That's a command, but He hasn't told us exactly how to do that. Could we assemble in a lean-to if we wanted to? Could we assemble just out there on the grass if we wanted to? Could we get a rented building if we wanted to? Could we build a building if we wanted to? Yes. Folks, He didn't tell us how to do it. See, there's called generic authority and there's called specific authority. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. That's specific, isn't it? Okay? That's specific. Did He tell him the kind of tools to make it with? He didn't tell him the kind of tools to use, did He? He just said, make the ark. So guess what? Noah was free to make the ark with any tools that he so desired. Because he had to get the ark built, didn't he? That's generic authority. So there's two different kinds of authority. But notice point number 3, the resentment of the men of Ophra. And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, I find that interesting. Early in the morning, where'd they go? To see where all the racket was. It just tells me the dedication these individuals had to who? To Baal, folks. They get up early in the morning. Where's the first place they go? They go to the altar of Baal. Man. See, there's this dedication in their hearts to this God. Behold, the altar of Baal was what? cast down, and the grove was cut down that was by it, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. The deed was done, wasn't it? I love that. Baal had been removed from the house of Joash. The only thing that remained was what? The reaction of the people. Man. Folks, here's the lesson. Many of God's commands, once carried out, will be witnessed by others. We cannot allow the possible negative reaction of others to keep us from doing the will of God. We must be willing to face what? The opposition. Do you not think Gideon, in his mind, knew these people were going to be upset the minute they discovered this site? Oh, yes. I noticed the search for the person responsible. And they said one to another, "Who hath done this thing?" When individuals have been violated, they want to know what? Who the culprit is. And buddy, they found out, did they not? There's an identification there in verse 29b. And when they inquired and asked, they said, "Gideon, the son of Joash, hath done this thing." Jimmy, you weren't around last night. Where were you? I was with Gideon. John, you weren't around last night. Where were you? I was with Gideon too. Folks, if you put enough pressure on certain individuals, will they eventually give you up? Wouldn't you like to know who told on Gideon? Somebody told on him. And it may have been one of those 10 men. Who knows who did? I put down there a note, though. God knows that His servant's name will be identified, but what? He still expects His chosen to what? Obey. You think God knew there was going to be some troubles if they cast down the altar of Baal? Oh yes, God knew that. Notice this, the sentence of death. Then the men of the city said unto Joash, "Bring out thy son that he may die, because he hath cast down the altar of Baal, because he hath cut down the grove that was by it." The death sentence, folks. You want to know what's interesting about that? The men who were requiring the life of Gideon should have had their life taken from them for worshiping Baal. That was the sentence of the law of Moses against idolatrous worship. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Here's what it says. "If there be found any among you within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, man or woman, that hath wrought wickedness in the sight of the Lord in transgressing His covenant, and hath gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or any host of heaven, which I have not commanded, that man and that woman thou shalt stone them with stones till they die." Isn't that amazing? The very command that those men should have suffered is the sentence that they placed upon who? Upon Gideon. It's just unbelievable, folks. Notice the, we call it the riposte of Joash, Gideon's father. "And Joash said unto all that stood against him, Will ye plead for Baal?" Well, somewhere Gideon's dad got a backbone, did he not? Can you imagine all those men came to the household of Joash and said, "What? Give us your son. We're going to do what to him? We're going to put him to death." Joash stands up in front of all those men, and what does he say? "Are you telling me you are here to plead for who? For Baal? That's who you're here to plead for?" Now notice this next question. "Will ye save him?" Now notice what he does. "He that will plead for him, let him be put to death while it is yet morning." There's the law, folks. And then listen to what he says. "If he be a god, let him plead for himself, because one hath cast down his altar." If Baal is a true god, you let Baal plead his own cause. Why does he need you to do it for him? Folks, he just showed these men that Baal is what? He's a false god. He doesn't exist. Gideon could live the rest of his life having cast down the altar of Baal, and he would never have died by the hands of Baal. Why? Because there is no Baal. There is no false god named Baal. It's made up in the minds of men, folks. Notice that last point there, the surname given to Gideon. He's called what? Jerub-Baal. Man. That name means this: let Baal contend. Don't let you men of the city contend. If anybody's got a problem against Gideon, who should it be? It needs to be Baal. Let Baal contend with me. I bet you Gideon went out and bought a t-shirt with that on it. You know? Let Baal contend. You guys leave me alone. Okay? But that's where we are. The altar is down. Baal worship has been rejected in the nation of Israel. What's next? We'll find out next time.